One of the most anticipated matchups for the Denver Broncos this season has arrived. The Denver Broncos are set to take on the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans at the Superdome tomorrow on Thursday Night Football. It is Sean Payton's anticipated return to the Big Easy, where he was head coach from 2006 to 2021, won the Super Bowl in the 2009 season, was a guy who helped kind of uplift the overall morale of that city after Hurricane Katrina, brought that city a championship. A guy who I feel like is very polarizing in the city of New Orleans right now. You either love Sean Payton for everything that he did for you in New Orleans, or you hate him for the way that he left, because the Saints really went all in those last couple of years with Drew Brees to try to win a championship, and they couldn't do it. They had a looming cap crunch. They were staring down a possible rebuild, which they've still tried to push back these last several years. But Sean Payton kind of saw the writing on the wall in New Orleans and decided that he didn't want to be a part of it long term. Also, in an article that was released last offseason, I believe it was, he talked about how he had mental burnout and fatigue after the 2021 season, which was very taxing and very draining after Jameis Winston, his starting quarterback, went down with a season-ending injury. You had COVID still running rampant in the NFL. The Saints had a game where pretty much their entire starting roster was out with COVID. Sean Payton was just mentally done after that. So he takes the year off, then comes to Denver after the Broncos decide to trade a first and a second round pick to get his rights from the Saints. And for the Broncos, I think objectively you can say that they're in a much better position than they were before Sean Payton got here. In their last 17 games, the Broncos are 10-7. That's a winning record. At the end of the day, it hasn't been perfect. There have been hiccups. There have been blemishes with Sean Payton's tenure here. But I think overall you can say that this team is heading in the right direction under Sean Payton. And now he gets to go back to a place where he had a lot of good memories, played or coached a lot of good football, and now is going to be in a position where he's going to want to hand the New Orleans Saints an L. And the Saints are beat to hell with injuries heading into this game. They have 4 players listed as out. Chris Olave with a concussion. This is probably the best week for Pat Surtain to be able to miss. He is also out with a concussion. It was the same case scenario for both players, where if you get concussed on a Sunday game and then have to play that following Thursday, you're not going to have time to clear the protocol. The protocol takes minimum 5 days to clear. Rashid Shaheed, their speedster wide receiver who actually leads the team in receiving yards, he's going to be out for this game and possibly out for the season with a meniscus injury. If he has to get a full repair, then he's going to be out for the season. If it's just a trim, he might only be out for a few weeks, but still going to miss this game. The Saints are sorely going to miss him on the offensive side of the ball. Cesar Ruiz, their starting right guard, he's out with a knee injury, along with Pete Werner, one of their starting linebackers. Derek Carr, he is listed as doubtful for this game with an oblique injury, so he has like a 25% chance, but Derek Carr's not going to play. He's going to at least miss this game. Spencer Rattler is going to start at quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. Taysom Hill, their do-it-all guy who can take snaps in the Wildcat at quarterback. He's lined up at running back, fullback, tight end. He's their personal protector on punt. Big-time player on special teams. He's out for this game with a broken rib. So the Saints are going to miss Taysom Hill literally all over the place. It's going to be a really tough ask trying to fill all those roles that Taysom Hill fills. Lucas Patrick, who is their backup left guard, he is out for this game as well. So Nick Saldiveri, the rookie, is going to have to step in, who actually started the year and then got benched, really hasn't played all that great. So Saldiveri is going to now step in for Lucas Patrick. And then Colin Saunders, big defensive tackle, former Kansas City Chief, he is questionable in this one with a back injury. So, yeah, man, the Saints are just beat to complete and utter hell with injuries right now. And this is a matchup that the Broncos are going to look to take advantage of, with the Saints basically fielding almost a practice squad team right now. As we always do on these game preview videos, we like to break things down from the opponent's perspective and talk about where the opponent's strengths and weaknesses are, where they could look to attack the Denver Broncos, and in turn, how the Denver Broncos could look to exploit some of their weaknesses. So, bringing in the roster for the New Orleans Saints under head coach Dennis Allen, Clint Kubiak is their offensive coordinator, a guy who Broncos fans are very familiar with, the son of Gary Kubiak. He served several various offensive assistant roles here in Denver, was actually the interim offensive coordinator at one point in time, calling plays when Nathaniel Hackett gave up that role in 2022. So Broncos country knows Clint Kubiak very well, along with the defensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints, Joe Woods. Woods was the former Broncos defensive coordinator under Vance Joseph. I think Woods has kind of undergone a significant shift philosophically in his scheme, though, since the days where he worked in Denver. He's kind of adopted more of a Vic Fangio type approach that he used in Cleveland when he was the defensive coordinator in Cleveland. And now he's kind of blending that with what Dennis Allen likes to do in New Orleans. It's an interesting hybrid, to say the least. I don't exactly think Joe Woods was the greatest hire there in New Orleans. Darren Rizzi, their special teams coordinator, though, is one of the best in the business. He can scheme up various ways to get blocks on punt returns, kickoff returns. He's one of the best in the league. So, you know, Darren Rizzi is going to try to take advantage of the Broncos special teams matchup in this one against Mike Westhoff and Ben Kotwica. Mike Westhoff has all those ties to New Orleans, so that's going to be a fun one to watch there on the special teams side of things. But moving into this team with Spencer Rattler, who is going to start at quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. Rattler last week versus Tampa Bay in his NFL debut was 22 for 40 for 243 yards, one passing touchdown, two interceptions, a lost fumble, and he took 5 sacks. So, not exactly the greatest debut from Spencer Rattler. He's very physically talented. He's got a really incredible arm. He's got some mobility. I think that the physical tools are definitely there with Spencer Rattler. He's one of the more physically talented quarterbacks in the NFL, just in terms of the physical traits that he has. But obviously, he slid all the way down to the 5th round this past year in the draft out of South Carolina, when early in his time in Oklahoma, people were touting him as a number 1 overall pick, possibly. He kind of fell off a little bit after getting benched for Caleb Williams, and I'm very interested to see what Rattler makes of this opportunity. I think that this Broncos defense, even without Pat Surtain, is going to give him a lot of exotic blitzes. They're going to pressure him. They're going to get in his face. They're going to play contain on the outside so he won't have any outlets to escape the pocket. That's going to really make it hard for Spencer Rattler to generate much production. And when you combine that with all these injuries that they have on the offensive side of the ball, that's going to make it a lot harder. You look at this receiving core for the Saints with Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed both out. You're going to start 2 rookies in Bub Means and Mason Tipton, along with a washed-up Cedric Wilson Jr. So that's going to be very tough. I think that they'll probably promote a couple of their receivers from the practice squad. They've got Dante Pettis, the former San Francisco 49er, and they've got Equanimous St. Brown, the former Bear and Packer. So those are 2 guys that I would maybe anticipate them promoting. But to give you guys a little bit more information on Bub Means and Mason Tipton, though, Means is a 2024 5th-round pick out of Pitt, 6'1", 212 pounds, ran a 4.43 40 time. He has scored a touchdown this year. And then Mason Tipton, he actually kind of scares me a little bit. He's an undrafted free agent out of Yale this year, 5'11", 187 pounds, runs a 4.33 40. He could be that Rashid Shaheed replacement. That scares the living crap out of me. It really does. This Broncos defense could get burned over the top. They play a lot of man coverage, and sometimes when you play man coverage, you do risk getting burned over the top. I'm a little concerned about Mason Tipton in this game, so I'm definitely going to keep an eye on him. I think that Bub Means he's going to be their quasi number 1 receiver in this game, but if they match up Mason Tipton in the slot, especially in scenarios where they're putting Jaquan McMillan on the outside and then they have Levi Wallace on the inside in the slot, ooh, that could possibly spell trouble. I'd rather put Wallace on the outside and keep Jaquan McMillan on the inside on Tipton because I'm very worried about what Tipton could do. He's the one guy in this receiving core that does scare me a little bit, for sure. Alvin Kamara, he is the best weapon that this Saints offense has right now. He's, to a degree, their entire offense with all of these injuries that they have, not having much of a receiving core right now. Alvin Kamara this year on the ground, 108 rushes for 428 yards, 4.1 yards per carry, a long run of only 17 yards this year. So hasn't had many explosive plays in the run game, but he did have a long reception of 57 yards this year. 6 rushing touchdowns, along with 28 receptions, 238 yards, 1 receiving touchdown. So he still is bringing you some explosive plays in the passing game, especially when you can match him up one-on-one in space. He can still kill you in that regard. I'm worried if Cody Barton gets matched up on Alvin Kamara, that could be a bad matchup for the Broncos. Cody Barton gave up that wheel route touchdown to Kamani Vidal last week against the Chargers. That's definitely a matchup that does concern me here for Denver. Jamal Williams, one of the more dirty work running backs in the NFL, really goes underappreciated for all the stuff that he does for this team. Kendre Miller, he should be hopefully coming back from injury soon. He's a very talented player. He's just not really been able to stay healthy. They've also got Jordan Mims in that backfield. Tight end wise, you've got Foster Moreau, the former Las Vegas Raider, Jawan Johnson. He's been in New Orleans for a while. Taysom Hill, he's officially listed as a tight end, but he's really a utility player. If there was a position just designated as athlete in the NFL, that would be what Taysom Hill would be designated as. And then keep an eye on Dallin Holker, the former Colorado State Ram, a guy that I really wanted the Broncos to sign as an undrafted free agent. I would have even been okay if the Broncos had drafted him, quite frankly. Keep an eye on Dallin Holker. He's a guy who could also make some plays. But moving into this offensive line here for the Saints, they're beat up. There's no way around it. Lucas Patrick, I said earlier he was their backup, but I guess actually he's listed as the starter. Saldiveri started the year at left guard, but regardless, it looks like it might be Saldiveri in this game, with Patrick questionable for this game with a chest injury. Definitely looking like this could be a good matchup for Denver with their interior defensive line. Guys like Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers, DJ Jones, the former New Orleans Saint, Malcolm Roach. It's not just Sean Payton making his return to New Orleans. There are 7 ex-New Orleans Saints players on this Broncos roster, along with 11 members of the assistant coaching staff. So a lot of ex-Saints returning to New Orleans in this one. Keep an eye on this matchup, though, for guys on the interior defensive line with Nick Saldiveri, along with Landon Young here. Landon Young at right guard, ahead of Cesar Ruiz, who's injured in this one. He is out with a knee injury, so keep an eye on that one. Connor McGovern's actually their starting center, the former Broncos starting center, who departed for the New York Jets in 2019. Trevor Penning is their right tackle, and he's a first-round draft bust, hasn't really played all that well. This year, he's been under heavy scrutiny. I think that he's had one of his better years this year, but that's not saying much. Trevor Penning is on his last legs in New Orleans. I'm kind of putting that nicely. I'm trying not to all out insult the guy, but he has not played well. And then they've got Oli Udoh as their backup right tackle. I honestly think they'd be better off starting Oli Udoh over Trevor Penning, but that's just me. I think that this Broncos team can take advantage of these matchups. Oh, and Talise Fuaga, their starting left tackle. I didn't really talk about him. He's a rookie starting left tackle. He's actually played pretty well for them, but anytime you have a rookie starting at tackle, that's always a matchup that favors a veteran edge rush unit, which the Broncos have with Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonito, Baron Browning set to return in this game, and then they've got Jonah Ellis as well, who's been good on the rotational end of things. So this is a really good matchup for the Broncos defensive line, both on the interior as well as the edge rush unit. This is basically a patchwork offensive line right now that only has 2 starters from their initial starting five at the beginning of the year. Ryan Ramczyk, who was going to be their starting right tackle, he is out for this season at least and might have suffered a career-ending injury, unfortunately. So yeah, man, this Saints offensive line is patchwork right now, and it's a very good matchup, at least on paper, for the Denver Broncos, especially when you have a rookie quarterback who's playing behind it in Spencer Rattler. But Rattler, keep an eye on his ability to get out of trouble with his legs, especially if New Orleans has those pass protection breakdown issues. We could easily see Spencer Rattler basically make chicken salad out of chicken feathers. Moving into the defensive side of the ball for the New Orleans Saints, they are definitely a lot healthier on this side of the ball. The only starter ruled out on the defensive side of the ball is going to be Pete Werner. You have Colin Saunders, who's listed as questionable, but I think he's got a pretty good chance to play in this game. Tyrann Mathieu is going to be playing a little bit banged up, but he's got, I think it's like a shoulder injury or something like that. Dennis Allen said he's going to play with extra padding and should have very little to no limitations in the game. Looking at the edge rush unit for the New Orleans Saints, you've got Carl Granderson and Chase Young listed as your starters, along with Peyton Turner and Cam Jordan, who's been in New Orleans for forever, it feels like at this point. And then Isaiah Foskey is also there as kind of a backup guy there. They've got a lot of really high-end names, especially with guys like Chase Young, Cam Jordan, but overall, their edge rush unit has actually gotten the most production out of Carl Granderson this year, who has 3.5 sacks on the season. Brian Bresee does lead the Saints in sacks overall with 4 on the interior defensive line. You've also got Nathan Shepard, Saunders, who I do anticipate to play, Christian Boyd, 6th-round pick this year, a guy who I really liked coming out of college, and then John Ridgway III as well. When you move into the linebacker unit, Pete Werner going to be injured for this one, but I do anticipate Willie Gay stepping into that weak side linebacker role in his place. Willie Gay is a guy who has given the Broncos some terrors during his time with the Kansas City Chiefs. Hopefully Willie Gay doesn't come back to haunt his old friends in the Denver Broncos. Demario Davis as their starting Mike, one of the best linebackers in the NFL over this past decade, but he's actually had a little bit of a drop-off, I feel like, this year. Their leading tackler on the year is actually their cornerback, Paulson Adebo, with 46 total tackles. So that's really impressive that you have a cornerback leading your team in total tackles. Demario Davis, very good player, but I feel like this hasn't been the best season overall for him. But still, man, you got to watch out for Demario Davis at all times. You can never discount him at all. At safety, you've got Tyrann Mathieu, you've got Jordan Howden as one of your other starters, JT Gray, who's a backup safety, but a really good special teams player. I believe one of their special teams captains. Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Adebo as your 2 corners. Lattimore has the ability to shut down your number 1 receiver. I'm worried about the matchup, Cortland Sutton against Marshawn Lattimore. Adebo has also, of course, played good football this year. And then you've got the 2nd-round pick, Kool-Aid McKinstry, and then Alontae Taylor as your nickel. Just briefly talking about special teams, Darren Rizzi as the coordinator, putting together one of the best special teams units in the NFL once again. Going to be interested to see who steps in as their return man now. Will it be Mason Tipton? I don't know if they want to put Tipton back there given his expanded role in the offense. That's going to be something to keep an eye on with Rashid Shaheed out. That's another role that he filled for this team. Blake Grupe, who is their kicker, he's been really reliable this year, hasn't missed a field goal, has missed a couple of extra points though. And then Matthew Hayball, who they brought in from the UDFA ranks this year to be their punter. I thought he's played pretty well as well this year. So this New Orleans Saints team, they definitely have some talent. They've got some good pieces to this roster, but overall, with the amount of injuries that they have, I think that this Broncos defense is going to make it really hard for the Saints offense to be able to generate much in the way of points. And then I think that this Broncos offense is going to have a really good matchup as well. This Saints defense has kind of been hot and cold this year. They gave up 51 points last week to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So again, I think this could be a good matchup for this offense to be able to get something going. Hopefully they can establish a ground game I'm thinking we might see more Audric Estime in this game. Keep an eye on A.T. Perry for the Denver Broncos. I anticipate him to make his Broncos debut against the New Orleans Saints, against his old team. He might burn the Saints for a big play deep. He's got that big playmaking threat ability for sure. Overall, I think the Broncos match up well, and I think they're going to beat the New Orleans Saints by multiple scores. I think that Sean Payton, he knows this Dennis Allen defensive scheme through and through. They practiced against each other every day in practice. I think that Sean Payton has the upper hand in terms of the matchup right now, and I'm going to give him the big win, 28-10, over his former team and protege, Dennis Allen and the New Orleans Saints. But I am curious, Broncos country, what is your prediction for this game? How do you think things are going to shake out? Do you think the Broncos are going to be able to take advantage of the injuries that the Saints have? Do you think that this matchup favors the Broncos as much as I do? Drop those comments down below, guys. I would love to hear your thoughts as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are both free and easy ways to show your support. Helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and it helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.